Have you found yourself avoiding people more and more as you get older? It's not because you're angry or bitter, and certainly not because you're trying to hurt anyone. But lately, silence feels better than company, and the thought of engaging in conversation or being around others feels heavier than it used to. The truth is, there's a reason for this shift, and it's not just about aging. It's about clarity. It's about emotional economy. It's about finally understanding what truly nourishes you and what only drains you. In this video, we'll explore 6 honest reasons why you might be avoiding people more these days, even if you used to be more social, more available, or more open. These reasons are not rooted in weakness, they're rooted in wisdom. They reflect how you've grown, what you've endured, and how your spirit has quietly reshaped your priorities. Because as we get older, we have less time for anything that feels empty, forced, or fake. Each reason we cover today will not only validate what you might be feeling, but also help you better understand how to protect your peace while staying connected to what truly matters. Stay with us until the end because the final reason might just be the one you didn't realize had taken root. But once you see it, everything will start to make sense. Let's dive in. 1. Limited emotional energy that must be protected. As we age, our emotional energy becomes something we spend more carefully, almost like a savings account. We've learned not to waste it on things that don't give back. When you were younger, you might have had the patience to listen to long-winded stories that went nowhere or sit through conversations where you weren't truly heard. But now, even small talk can feel like a chore, not because you've stopped caring, but because you've learned to care more selectively. You no longer have the bandwidth for surface-level connections or relationships that take more than they give. Every phone call, every visit, every gathering asks something of you, and if the return isn't meaningful, you feel it immediately. It's not that you dislike people, it's that you finally understand how much it costs to engage deeply, and you're no longer willing to pay that cost for interactions that leave you feeling emptier than when you started. I knew a man named Robert, 84, who used to host dinners every month for old friends. Over time, he noticed he felt tired, not from cooking or cleaning, but from having to keep the energy up when no one else seemed to notice how drained he was. Eventually, he stopped hosting, not because he didn't love his friends, but because he realized he needed to reserve his energy for things that filled him, not emptied him. As we get older, we also become more aware of time, not in a fearful way, but in a sacred way. You start to see each hour of your day as something worth guarding. And if a conversation doesn't offer connection, or a gathering leaves you feeling flat, you no longer pretend it was worth it. You listen to your fatigue, trust your need for quiet, and stop explaining why you're avoiding certain people. Avoiding people now isn't always about avoiding conflict. Sometimes, it's about avoiding depletion. Because when your nervous system is already doing the work of healing, regulating, and navigating the complexities of aging, even a simple interaction can feel like too much if it's not rooted in real care. Once you've tasted the peace that comes from solitude, it becomes harder to step back into the noise that doesn't serve you. You're not being antisocial. You're being honest. You've earned the right to spend your emotional energy on the things and people that give you something real in return. 2. Outgrowing old roles and expectations. As time passes, one of the most quiet but powerful shifts is realizing that you've outgrown the role people still expect you to play. Maybe you were always the listener, the helper, the peacekeeper, or the one who held everything together. But now those old patterns feel heavier than they used to, and continuing to play them no longer feels like love. It feels like self-abandonment. You're not the same person you were 10 or 20 years ago, and pretending to be for the comfort of others has become too much. Many people don't notice when you change. They continue relating to the version of you they remember, not the one you've become. And when you try to show them who you are now, quieter, slower, perhaps more introspective, they might resist. They might tease you about not being as involved, not showing up as often, or not being your old self. But deep down, you know the truth. You are being yourself. It's just not the version of you they're used to. I once knew a woman named Caroline, 76, who had spent her whole life being the go-to person in her family. Everyone came to her with their problems, and she always had an answer, a meal, or a bed ready. But after a health scare and a period of deep reflection, she realized she didn't want to be the emotional caretaker anymore. She wanted peace. She wanted stillness. When Caroline started saying no, the people around her didn't understand. But slowly, she stopped apologizing for it. Avoiding people now doesn't always mean you dislike them. Sometimes it means you no longer want to be seen through an outdated lens. You want relationships that meet you as you are, not as you were. If those relationships don't exist, or if people refuse to evolve with you, you might choose distance over the pain of pretending. Your priorities have shifted, and the freedom you feel in solitude often comes from knowing you no longer have to perform. Letting go of old roles isn't selfish, it's sacred. And the more you reclaim the space that's truly yours, the more peace you'll find in the quiet that follows. 3. Silence feels more nourishing than small talk. There comes a point in life when you stop craving noise for the sake of noise. You stop reaching for words to fill space, and you begin to understand the value of silence, not just as a pause between conversations, but as something complete in itself. What once felt like loneliness now feels like a kind of clarity, a space where you can hear your own thoughts and feel your own presence without interruption. Once you've tasted that kind of silence, small talk starts to feel like static. For years, you might have gone to gatherings out of habit, answered phone calls just because they came in, or kept up appearances to be polite. But now, conversations about the weather, the latest headlines, or the neighbor's backyard remodel feel thin. You crave depth. You want to talk about things that matter, or not talk at all. If that depth isn't there, you'd rather sit in quiet than stretch yourself trying to make something out of nothing. I remember a man named James, 83, from Los Angeles, California, who once told me he stopped going to his weekly coffee group, not because he disliked the people, but because the conversations never went anywhere. They never moved past surface pleasantries or rehashed complaints. He said, "I realized I was leaving those mornings more drained than uplifted." So instead, James began walking alone near the ocean. Not to isolate, but to listen. Not to disconnect, but to reconnect with what mattered. Avoiding people now may simply mean you've learned to value peace over presence. You no longer feel the need to catch up just to stay in the loop. You don't mind missing out on the latest updates, and you're okay with long pauses in conversations because you're no longer trying to entertain or impress. You're just trying to be. It's not that you don't want connection. You do. But you want it to be real, restful, and rooted in something more than obligation. You want laughter that feels natural, silence that doesn't feel awkward, and company that doesn't require you to carry the weight of the moment. When small talk starts to feel like a burden, it's not a sign that you're closing off, it's a sign that you're coming home to yourself. And sometimes, the richest conversations happen when nothing at all is said. 4. Quick detection of hidden agendas. As you grow older, something remarkable begins to sharpen, not just your wisdom, but your ability to sense when something isn't quite right. It's not paranoia, it's pattern recognition. Over the years, you've sat through enough conversations, seen enough behavior, and witnessed enough inconsistencies to know when someone's words and intentions don't line up. And now, the moment you feel that disconnect, even if it's subtle, you quietly step away. There was a time when you might have given people the benefit of the doubt again and again. You might have explained away their behavior, made excuses for their tone, or convinced yourself you were being too sensitive. But now, you trust your instincts more than you trust someone's charm. When someone gossips too easily, flatters too quickly, or always seems to need something, your inner warning light turns on. And once it does, you no longer push it aside. I once met a woman named Helen, 78, who said she used to ignore red flags because she didn't want to seem rude. But over time, she realized that being polite had cost her more peace than any argument ever had. Now, when someone tries to pull her into drama or show signs of manipulation, she simply exits the situation. No big scene, no confrontation, just distance. And in that space, she's found a deeper kind of safety. Avoiding people doesn't always come from hurt. Sometimes it comes from mastery. The mastery of knowing who adds value to your life and who adds noise. The mastery of listening between the lines. The mastery of protecting your boundaries without needing to explain them. You've learned to recognize who drains you, who uses you, and who only shows up when they want something. Rather than confronting or fixing them, you've chosen the quiet path, disengagement, not to punish, but to preserve your peace. This clarity is hard-earned. It comes from years of trusting the wrong people, staying too long in the wrong rooms, and trying to rescue others while losing parts of yourself. But now you no longer mistake attention for care. You don't confuse consistency with loyalty. And you certainly don't equate a smile with safety. You avoid certain people because your inner compass has finally been calibrated by experience, and once it's aligned, You no longer waste time walking in circles. You move forward, quietly, confidently, and without apology. 5. Lingering effects of past betrayals. One of the quietest reasons people pull away as they age has nothing to do with current relationships and everything to do with the ones that came before. Maybe it was a friend who disappeared when you needed them most. Maybe it was family who judged you at your lowest. Or perhaps it was someone you trusted deeply who took that trust and broke it without a second thought. Even if you've forgiven them on the surface, something inside you still remembers. Betrayal has a way of rewriting how we relate to others. It teaches us where not to step, what not to say, and most painfully, who not to expect too much from. You may still smile, you may still be kind, but there's a part of you that now holds back, not from coldness, but from caution. Because you've learned that even long friendships can dissolve overnight. That even people who say, "I'm here for you," can disappear the moment things get tough. That kind of learning doesn't just disappear, it settles into your nervous system like a soft warning. I remember a man named George, 85, who told me he wasn't bitter about his past. He just no longer wanted to keep testing whether someone would show up. He had spent years being disappointed, not because people were cruel, but because they were inconsistent. And over time, he decided that peace wasn't found in second chances. It was found in solitude that didn't disappoint. When people ask why you're more distant now, they may not see the pages of history that brought you here. They don't know the nights you spent wondering why someone never called. They don't see the silent moments when trust was slowly chipped away, not in dramatic scenes, but in small, accumulating absences. They only see the space you've now created and mistake it for coldness when it's really just self-preservation. You avoid people, not because you've stopped believing in love or friendship, but because you now understand that trust isn't something you give lightly. It's something earned slowly, and when it's lost, it takes more than words to rebuild. That doesn't mean you've closed your heart. It just means your heart now has better gates, stronger ones, built not from fear, but from experience. And if someone wants in, they'll need to show not just that they care, but that they can be counted on. Because after all you've been through, consistency means more than charm, and presence means more than promises. 6. Fulfillment in your own company. There comes a point in life when being alone stops feeling like isolation and starts feeling like liberation. When you were younger, being alone might have stirred anxiety, made you feel like you were missing out, or somehow falling behind. But now, solitude doesn't signal lack, it signals freedom. And that freedom isn't loud or dramatic. It's soft, steady, and full of quiet joys that no one else needs to witness for them to matter. You've likely spent decades surrounded by others, children, co-workers, friends, extended family. You've hosted, helped, and held it all together. But at some point, you began to wonder, what would life feel like if I let myself just be? No obligations, no small talk, no pressure to entertain, perform, or explain. And what you found wasn't emptiness, it was wholeness. I knew a woman named Evelyn, 79, from Denver, Colorado, who said she used to dread weekends when no one called or came by. But then she began filling her time differently. Reading, sitting by the window with her tea, watching birds in the morning, writing letters she never sent. She said, "I realized I didn't need company to feel complete. I just needed to return to myself." That shift doesn't come from bitterness. It comes from knowing yourself well enough to no longer depend on others to define your day. You wake when you want, eat when you want, think your thoughts without interruption, and follow your own rhythm. And that kind of autonomy becomes sacred. Because at this stage, the best company is often the one that doesn't demand a single thing from you. People may ask why you're not more social. They may wonder why you've stopped attending every gathering or returning every call. But they don't realize that your time alone isn't a void, it's a garden. It's where you tend to your thoughts, your peace, your body, your stories. And unlike some relationships, it never asks you to shrink or bend. You found comfort in your own presence, and in doing so, you've removed the pressure to always explain, always adapt, always show up for others before yourself. You still care, you're still kind, but now your kindness includes you too. Choosing solitude isn't a sign that something's wrong with you. In fact, it might be one of the clearest signs that you've finally come home to yourself. Every reason we've talked about today, whether it's protecting your energy, shedding outdated roles, craving peace over noise, spotting insincerity, carrying the scars of old betrayals, or finding richness in your own company, isn't about withdrawing from life. It's about honoring your own. You haven't given up on people. You've simply stopped sacrificing your well-being to meet others where they refuse to meet you. You've stopped mistaking busyness for connection, and you've learned that being selective isn't the same as being distant. It's being deliberate. You don't owe anyone an explanation for the boundaries you've drawn or the quiet you've chosen. The people who truly understand you won't need one, and the ones who don't? Maybe they were only meant to know an earlier version of you, not the person you've become. So if you've been wondering why your circle feels smaller, your tolerance feels lower, or your desire to engage feels quieter, now you know, you're not broken. You're just awake. And that awakening will continue to guide you toward the kind of peace that doesn't depend on the presence of others. Thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and share one thing you learned today and how you plan to use it in your life. Your thoughts are important to us, so don't hesitate to share them. Reading your comments gives us great motivation and encouragement. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.